Okay, folks, first and foremost, does everybody have their notes? They were supposed to start yesterday. And those notes should look like what's on the board. Is that correct? Right? You guys are supposed to do those problems? Okay, so I want you to go ahead and check your work. When you chopped them in half and you worked them out, did you get that? Check all 8 of them, I think there is. Everybody good? Yeah? Even if you didn't do them? Okay. So if you remember, back a couple days ago, we did another set of notes that had this box type of thing on it, correct? Okay. That was back when the leading coefficient was a 1, meaning that all of these numbers in front were 1s. Is that the case anymore? No. If you look at the top of your notes, it says factoring with leading coefficient other than 1. And none of these have a 1 up top. Everybody clear on that? Crystal clear. So we are going to start factoring things that do not start with a 1. Make sense? Okay, before we do that, let's go back and make sure you remember the different steps that we need to follow. Okay, what's the first step when factoring always? Then, the only way you know how to factor with 4 terms is by doing what? Grouping. And how do we group them? Okay. Then if there's 3 terms, what do we make? Okay. And none of that is going to change, folks. It's just going to be a little bit more, a few more steps if we start with something besides a 1. Everybody good? Yes? Okay, so tell me, what's the difference between the left side and the right side? Okay, so let's look at the left-hand side first. Are these symbols the same or different? They're all the same, meaning what's happening with the constant? You guys see that? Yes, and what's the fancy math word that means add? Sum. The sum of the constant means, what about my symbols? If it's the sum of the constant, nope, not addition. It means same symbols. Okay. So then over on the right-hand side, what do you notice about those symbols? These symbols in here are different for all of these problems, right? So what do you notice about the constant? You guys see how the constant is always being subtracted over here? What's the fancy math word that means subtract? Difference. So difference of the constant, finish the sentence please, means different symbols. Okay. Now, before, when we looked at these things and they started with 1s, I only needed factors of the constant, correct? That is no longer going to be the case. And this is the difference that happens when it does not start with a 1. Okay? You must have factors of the first and last term that add to the middle. Before, we only did the last term, correct? Which was the constant. Everybody with me? Yes, we only did the last term. Now, because this does not start with a 1, we do factors of the first and last term. So for this bottom one here, I've got a 2 and I've got a 28. What is 2 times 28? What's 2 times 28? 56. So I'm going to need factors of 56 that would add to 15. Does that make sense to everybody? That's different than we've done before, correct? Okay. So over here, on the right-hand side of this chart, I need factors of the first and last term that do what? Subtract to the middle. So far, the only difference is that you are going to have to multiply the first and the last term, correct? Yes? Okay. So I want to make note of that down here. You are going to multiply the first and the last term together. Okay. Once you do that, you will then create a 4-term problem to group. You will create a 4-term problem to group. And you're probably like, okay, what does that mean? I'll show you. Okay. But that's what we're going to do here. So, when you are ready, I am ready. We all good here? You sick of looking at me with this headset on my face? I'm sick of it right here. Okay, we ready? First problem. First things first, is there a GCF? Is there a number I can take out of 2, 7, and 9? Nothing besides a 1, correct? Okay, next question. How many terms do you have up here? 3 terms, which means I need to make what? A binomial times a binomial. Okay, don't put anything in there yet. Now, does this thing start with a 1? No. So you need to multiply the first and the last term together. So what is 2 times 9? It is 18. You need to tell me factors of 18 that will subtract to 7. Does everybody see that? Factors of 18 that will subtract to 7. 9 times 2, I'm hearing. Is everybody clear on that? Yes? Okay. If we were subtracting, does that mean same or different? Different. And the bigger one has to be positive. So it's going to be a +9 and a -2. Is everybody following me so far? Yes? Okay. So here's where I'm going to make that 4-term problem. Are you ready? I'm going to keep the 2a squared out front. Then, if I have different symbols, folks, I want to put my -1 first here, okay? Now, this is going to be a -2a. Then I'm going to put a +9a. And then I'm going to drop down the -9. How's everybody doing? I want to show you what happened here. I basically took this 7 and I split it into -2a plus 9. Is -2 plus 9 7? So I really didn't change the problem, I just wrote it differently. Does everybody understand that? Now I have 4 terms, don't I? So what am I going to do if I have 4 terms? I'm going to group them. So group the first 2, group the last 2. And I'm realizing I didn't leave you a lot of room down there. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, what can I take out of the first group? A 2 and an a. So I'm going to divide them both by 2a. The 2a goes out front. What's left if you take out 2a? A minus... What's negative 2 divided by 2? 1. And the a's cancel, don't they? So this will be minus 1. Now I start with this symbol right here, which is a plus. What can I take out of the next group? A 9. So I'm going to divide them by 9. Put the 9 out front. What's left if you take out a 9? A. What about here? Minus 1. Okay, now remember, when we do this 4-term thing and we group, we got to have a repeated factor, right? What's my repeated factor? So a minus 1 is part of my answer. What's the leftover factor? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my final answer. It takes a little bit of work. Okay, more than a little bit of work. How we doing? Basically, we're combining about 3 things that we've previously done into one problem. Bless you. Everybody good here? Okay, I'm ready to try again. Are you? Okay, here we go. Number 2. Actually, I want to skip number 2. I'm going to go to number 3, please. Number 3. Is there a GCF? I don't see a GCF, do you? Okay, does it? How many terms does it have? So what are you going to make? Come on, stay with me here, guys. Now, does it start with a 1? It does not. So you need to multiply the first and the last term. What does that give you? 36. So, ladies and gentlemen, you need factors of 36 that will subtract to 5. What factors of 36 will subtract to 5? 9 times 4. So I'm going to say 9 and 4. If we are subtracting, is that same or different symbols? Different, and the bigger one has to be positive. So it'll be a a plus 9 and a minus 4. All right, now I'm ready to make my 4 terms. Are you ready? Drop down the 3d squared. Now I'm going to use these that we just created, but I'm going to put the minus 1 first. So it'll be a minus 4d, then a plus 9d, and then I'm going to drop down the minus 12. Does everybody understand why I'm putting d's on those? Because I'm taking this thing right here and splitting it into that. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes? Are you sure? Okay, now that I have 4 terms, what am I going to do? I'm going to group them 2 by 2. What can you take out of the first group? A D. So the D goes out front. What's left? Okay. What can you take out of the second group? Divide them by 3. So I'm going to start with this plus sign and then put the 3 there. What's left if you divide out that 3? And then? How's everybody doing? Good. So what's the repeated factor? So that goes there. What's the leftover factor? And that, ladies and gentlemen, gives me my final answer. How would you check to see if you're right? I don't have anything to plug in. I didn't solve it. All I did was factor it. I would chop the first one in half and distribute it out to see if it would equal the original problem. Still doing okay? Yeah? Okay, let's flip it over. I'd like to go to number 5 there in the middle. Did I give you a little bit more room on the back there? Yeah, a little bit. I could have spaced them out a little more, huh? All right, take a look at number 5. First things first. Do you have a GCF? No. How many terms do you have there? So you're going to make, and maybe I'll do it up here, a binomial times a binomial. That'll give you a little more room, right? Okay. Does this thing start with a 1? No, which means I need to multiply the first and last terms, which gives me what? 48. I need factors of 48 that will subtract to 13. 16 times 3, she says. How does everybody feel about that? Doing okay? Now, if I'm subtracting, does that mean same or different? Different symbols. The bigger one is going to be positive, so it'll be a plus 16 and a minus 3. Now I'm ready to make my 4-term problem. Drop down the 2f squared. I'm going to put my negative factor first. In this case, it was minus 3. And what am I going to put on that minus 3? An f. Then I'm going to put a plus 16 with an f on it. And then I'm going to drop down the constant of minus 24. Now what are you going to do? Group them. There's 4 terms, so I'm going to group it 2 by 2. What can you take out of the first group? So we'll divide out an f, put the f out front. What's left if you take out that f? Good, the f's cancel, but we still have a minus 3 there. Still following? Yeah? Gonna be lost if you're not. Okay, what can I take out of the second group? Higher than a 4. An 8. So we'll divide out an 8. That started with a plus, so I'm going to put a plus 8. What's left if you divide out an 8? 2 what? 2f minus 3. Okay, what's your repeated factor? What's your repeated factor? And there, ladies and gentlemen, is our final answer. Still doing A-okay? Yeah? What do you think? Besides it being a little bit more work, what do you think? It's okay? All right. Let's do 2 more that are pretty much just like this. Let's do number 7, please. First things first, do you have a GCF? No GCF. How many terms do you have? 3. So I'm going to make 2 binomials. Does this thing start with a 1? No, it does not. So you need to multiply the first and the last, and what do you get? 105, he says. So I need factors of 105 that will subtract to 8. So here's where I hope you got a calculator. Factors of 105 that will subtract to 8. Please pick up your calculator and start trying some stuff. 15 and 7. Folks, how do you feel about 15 and 7? Check your calculator. Do they multiply to 105? Yep. Do they subtract to 8? Okay. Symbols need to be same or different. Different. And the bigger one needs to be. So that means the 15 will be negative and the 7 will be positive. Now I am ready to make my 4-term problem. Drop down the 3i squared. I'm going to put the negative factor first. And what am I going to put on this 15? An I. Then I'm going to put the positive factor second, also with an I. And then I'm going to drop down the minus 35. James, how you doing back there? Okay. Everybody else doing okay? What are you going to do next? Okay, we're going to group it. What can you take out of the first group? 3 and an I. So the 3i goes out front. What's left? Good. I'm going to start this with a plus because that starts with a plus. What can I take out of these? A 7. What's left if you take out the 7? Perfect, right? All right, folks, what's your repeated factor? And what's the leftover factor? There, we're getting the hang of it. Getting the hang of it. Questions? How we doing, guys? Just fine? Okay, where do I want to go next? How about number 11? Right here. First things first, at number 11. Do you have a GCF? Nope. How many terms? So you're going to make a binomial times a binomial. Does this thing start with a 1? No. So you're going to multiply the first and the last, and what do you get? 40. So you need factors of 40 that will add to 13. What kind of factors of 40 will add to 13? Perfect. 8 and 5. Should my symbols be the same or different? Same, and they both should be negative. So I'm ready to make my 4-term problem. I will drop down the 10m squared. Now, folks, they're both negative here, aren't they? So does it matter which one comes first? Nope. What am I going to put on this 8? And how about on the 5? Good, and then we'll drop down the 4. Now that we have 4 terms, group them up. 2 by 2. What can you take out of the first group? And the m? What's left, folks? Minus 4? Okay, now, this next parenthesis starts with a negative, doesn't it? So I need to start with a negative. What can I take out of both of those? Nothing. So what do we use? A 1. So folks, if I put this 1 down here, do you see how it's going to be a negative 1? Which means I need to divide these by negative 1. Good. So what is the repeated factor? And what's the leftover factor? Again, I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, how do you check to see if you're right? Break it up, chop it in half, break it up, however you want to say it, and distribute it out. Doing okay? Are you ready for another step? You think so? We'll get to that tomorrow, actually. The only other step I'm going to add today is the possibility of a GCF. So, do you see any questions on there that would have a GCF? Which one did you say? 15 is close. What do you want to take out of 15? Yeah. No, that's close though, right? Okay, so try another one. Which other one might have a GCF? I hear a 12. What can I take out of 12 before I even start? A 2. All of these things need divided by 2 before we start. When you divide them by 2, what's left? Keep going. Good. Okay, how's everybody doing there? Fine? Okay, how many terms do you have inside of there, folks? 3. So I'm going to make my 2 binomials, and I'm going to drop the 2 in front of there that we took out. Now, does that trinomial start with a 1? No. So I need to multiply the first and the last term. What does that give you? Don't even give me the negative. Just tell me 6. Okay? So I need factors of 6 that will add to 1. Oh, I'm not sorry, not add to 1. Subtract to 1. 3 times 2? If we are subtracting, does that mean same or different? Different, and the bigger one has to be positive. So it's going to look something like that. All right, now I'm ready for 4 terms. Folks, do I worry about the 2 that's out front? No, we're just going to drop down the 6n squared. Remember, I want to put the negative factor first, so I'm going to say negative 2, and what's going to go on that? And then a plus 3n, and then drop down the what? I'm going to drop down the minus 1. Questions, folks? Group them up. What can you take out of the first group? A 2 and an n. What's left? Good. Now the next set of parentheses starts with a plus, so I'm going to put plus here. What can I take out of that group? A 1, nothing, so I'm going to use a 1. Folks, does dividing by 1 change anything? No. If you divide them by 1, it doesn't change anything. So, what's your repeated factor? What's your leftover factor? Good. So that's what taking out a GCF first looks like. Okay, you got another one that needs a GCF taken out of it? 14, he says. Yup. We ready to move on here? Okay, what can I take out of 14? A Q. All of these need divided by Q. So put the Q out front. What's left if you take out the Q? Good. Nope, the Q's cancel. There we go. So how many terms do you have in there? So what are we going to make? 2 binomials. We're going to drop that Q that we took out front. Does this thing start with a 1? Mm-mm. So I need to multiply the first and the last terms, which gives me what? Factors of 42 that will add to 17. Factors of 42 that will add to 17. Say it again. 6 and 7? 6 and 7 multiply to 42, but 6 and 7 only add to 13. We want factors of 42 that will add to 17. (14 and 3? Folks, does 14 times 3 equal 42? Does it add to 17? Okay, so same or different symbols, ladies and gentlemen. And they need to be okay. So when I make my 4-term problem, I'm going to drop down the 7q squared. Does it matter which one of these go first? No, because they're both negative, but what am I going to put on them? Good. Got some q's on there, and then we drop down the plus 6. Group them up. What can you take out of the first group? 7q. So the 7q goes out front. What's left when you take that out? Oh, what's 14? There we go. Now, the next parenthesis starts with a minus sign, so I'm going to start with a minus sign. What can I take out of there? A 3. And notice, because it started with a negative, I'm actually dividing out a negative 3. So what would be left? Yep. Perfect. Final answer. What are my repeated factors? What are my leftover factors? Fantastic. And that is your final answer. Questions? No? I'm telling you, you guys working out those box problems on the front in that chart for homework saved us so much time today. Okay, so where do you guys want to go next? 10? Okay, we can do 10, which would be right here. Do you have a GCF of L? Divide all of these by L, which means an L is out front. What do you have left when you take out an L? Okay. Good. Okay. How many terms is inside of there? So you're going to make two binomials, not forgetting to drop down what? That L has to go in front of there. Does this trinomial start with a 1? No. So I need to multiply the first and the last terms. What is 2 times 27? I need factors of 54 that will subtract to 15. Factors of 54 that will subtract to 15. (18) and 3. Should my symbols be the same or different? Different, and the bigger one should be negative. So that means a minus 18 and a plus 3. All right, now I'm ready for my 4-term problem. Drop down the 2L squared. What am I going to put on this minus 18? What am I going to put on the plus 3? And then we're going to drop down that minus 27. Group them. What can you take out of the first group? And. Good. 2 and L, which means that goes out front. What's left? There we go. Next thing starts with a plus. What can I take out of the second group? A 3. So, nope. 9. Good. Okay. What's my repeated factor? And what's my leftover factor? There we go. Okay, I think I just want to do maybe one more. And I want to do one that has 2 variables in it. Either 15 or 6 or 2. 15, you probably got the most room underneath 15, right? Okay, let's do 15 then. First question is always the same. Is there a GCF? No GCF. How many terms do you have? So we're going to make a binomial times a binomial. Does this thing start with a 1? No. So you need to multiply the first and last terms, which gives you what? I need factors of 12 that will add to 8. 6 times 2. If we are adding, does that mean same or different? And they both need to be positive. Adding. You got it. Now I'm ready for my 4-term problem. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. I'm going to drop down the 4r squared. Doesn't matter which of these come first. So I'll put the plus 6. What needs to go on that 6? R and S. If you look up here, that has an R and an S on it. So I'm going to put RS, and the same thing with the plus 2. It's going to have an RS. And then we're going to drop down the plus 3, S squared. Group them up. What can you take out of the first group? 2R, which goes out front. What's left? Everybody following William there? Yeah? Okay, now we start with a plus because that starts with a plus. What can I take out of the second group? Not an R. They both have an S. So I can just take out an S. What do you get when you divide out an S? 2R. Three S. Did you guys see how the 3 is still there? And there's still one S left in there? How we doing back there, James and Chase? Come on. What is my repeated factor? What's the leftover factor? Wonderful. And that is my final answer. I think that's all I need to do with you for today. Sound okay? Now, there's a few in there that we didn't do. If you want them for extra credit, put them on your homework paper. Good? Yes? So, your homework is so I do understand these do take some work. That's why I'm only giving you 5 problems for homework. Fair? I think so. So let's get out your books. You've got a little more than 5 minutes. You can at least maybe get 1 or 2 done. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. That middle one in the front, right? Yeah.